what we're going to delve into here is, of course, the bunker. And so it's not enough to say from the sand we want to take 2 inches of sand behind the golf ball to propel it out. Because quite frankly, for as long as your posture is compromised in the bunker, it's always going to be a losing proposition. So one of the most common issues I see from the bunker is people will go ahead and hit a shot where they get here and they go ahead and they scull it over the green. Where that comes from is two places. First and foremost is your posture. And that if I'm getting here with my weight over the ball of my foot and my shoulders rounded, to battle inertia of the swing, I'm going to pop up because my quads are engaged. Also, if my shoulders are rounded, I'm going to end up lifting and lifting. So this whole idea of trying to hit 2 inches of sand behind a golf ball, let's say we have, there's our golf ball, there's that dollar bill or 100 depending on the club that you're at. People would say, hey, enter the club here, exit it here. So if I'm coming up, I'm going to have to do a lot of timing in order to even try to get the ball out. All the while, because my hands are firing, it engages more my leading edge the club's going to dig versus engaging bounce, which is exactly what we're going to talk about now, which is what is bounce, why do we have it, and how do we engage it? More importantly, what to do in different sand types and conditions. Because for as long as we're playing off of firm sand versus soft sand, it actually warrants different techniques. So if you're playing off of different sand conditions all the time, as a player, you need to know how to accommodate that. Because for as long as you walk into the bunker with one technique, you might be really good from soft sand, terrible from firm sand. And here we are on a golf course where we have two different courses, each with different sand types. One soft, one firm, so we want to talk about them both. You really add a lot more depth, yet again, to your arsenal. I'm preaching the most important thing that we're talking about so far is our posture. Because again, from the bunker, we want to be sure that we're hinged back and also engaged. Because for as long as we're not, if we're on the ball of our foot and rounded, it's going to produce the same thing that happens in terms of our fear hitting the golf ball long because of our posture coming up, which creates the second condition that produces the same shot out of a self-fulfilling prophecy. In that, if I get used to seeing myself come up and out of my shot and hit the ball, thin every single time, I'm going to go ahead and form a trepidation saying, I know I'm going to hit the ball thin, but I don't want to go as thin. So I start slowing down my swing. And so I get here, and out of that same place of fear, I go, I'm kind of scared, and I don't even get the ball out of the bunker. Versus saying I should be able to commit to a full swing back and through, understanding it's the force of the sand that will propel the ball out of the bunker. And so when it comes to the role of bounce, first of all, what it is, this is the leading edge, this is the sole, this is the bounce. The bounce angle is a reference to when the club is sitting at 90, how much the leading edge is over the horizon. This is the bounce angle. This would look like more bounce, this would look like less bounce. The most common way people have said engage bounce has been through opening up the face, right? The issue though is as I do this, I very quickly limit the amount of surface area of the face I have to work with yet again. And so an easier way to engage bounce is through shaft lean. So it's not enough to say, hey, I want to get here and lean my hands back, because that's changing the dynamics of my wrist, changing how they fire. So I want you to recall, how is it that I said that I want you to tilt in the full swing was by bumping the hip forward, right? The basic reasons for this, it allows your right hand to get to the club without protracting the shoulder, moves my hip in a more neutral position, and from here, easier time shifting your weight. How did I say in the bunker that I did not want to tilt? Was by tilting the upper body back, right? The reason why is because if I tilt my upper body back, I move the bottom of the arc back, and I'm keeping my weight stuck on my right side, so there's no weight shift. In the bunker, that's exactly what I want to do. If I'm playing off of soft sand conditions and want to engage bounce, and I want to hit the sand first, if I tilt back, I'm ensuring that I'm hitting however much I've tilted behind the golf ball, and also by me tilting back, I'm engaging more bounce through this idea of shaft lean. Also, I'm keeping more of my weight on my right side, so there's no propensity to lunge forward, because what that will do is also cause me to hit the ball thin. So what I can do is I can get into my setup, as I would, primary tilt, engagement, and from here I'm going to go ahead and tilt my upper body back a little bit, and from here I can make a really full swing with absolutely no fear of catching the golf ball first. So again, down the line what that would look like, here I am, primary tilting back, secondary tilting this way, making a full swing with no fear of catching the golf ball first. And so it's one of those things where, for as long as you're trying to time how the hands enter the sand, a lot of issues come along with that, namely timing. So I can be really good from one bunker terrible from another because you don't really have a strategy that works. So when it comes out of soft sand, we certainly want to employ this concept. When it comes to, yes, if the sand is soft, we want to be using, a lot more bounce. We don't want the club to dig, because if I let the leading edge come in first, the club's going to get stuck out of soft sand. And that's where this idea of tilting back is a great way to engage bounce from soft sand conditions. And so when it comes to distance control, out of these lies, what we're looking for is either changing the club or changing the acceleration on the way through. Where the backswing is going to be very similar to our pitching action in terms of how we bring it back with the upper body. We're not trying to shift our weight back or anything else. So if I wanted to hit a shorter shot, off of that same, soft sand kind of conditions, we'll talk about the firmer stuff in footprints and stuff like that a little bit later. But if I'm off of some softer stuff, if I just change, so here I am, hinged back, tilted back, if I make a smaller forward swing, in other words, have less acceleration on the way through, that will produce a shot that will go a little bit shorter. So it's nothing changing regarding the actual dynamics of my swing. So that,
finish the swing. You just
it's not like there's less acceleration to carry me to different distances. If I want to hit a longer shot yet, I'm going to not make a bigger backswing necessarily, but I'm going to make a bigger follow through. So there's be more byproduct of acceleration. I'm not trying to hinge my wrist more, add more speed that way. It's just the rate in which I rotate on the way through. And I go ahead and hit the ball thin if I don't tilt back.
Yeah.
And that's one of the important things to realize as a big common thing. So it's one of those things that I say, hey, as long as I don't tilt back, if I tilt forward this way, I should hit the ball clean because I'm doing what I'm doing in the full swing.
Right.
And that's where to realize that if I go ahead and want to hit the ball further, it's one of those things I'm going to grab a different wedge. I might go from my 56 to here's a 46 degree wedge. And as long as I'm playing off of the same soft conditions, I can go ahead and tilt back in the same capacity, make a full action, and I'm going to see a ball that will go ahead, have a little bit of a lower trajectory, but also run out a little bit more, but more importantly, go a little bit further. So it's going to give me a lot of ways to say, now I have a lot more shots, because I have one technique out of soft sand conditions. I can either go ahead and change either the wedge I'm using or the acceleration on the way through. So of course, when it comes to spin, the next thing we're going to talk about is how we hit sand off of, or how to hit off from firm sand conditions. But also, the more tilt we have, it's going to increase the amount of sand that we have, which would also, kind of decrease the spin, increase the run out. So even though I would rather you err on having a little bit too much of this tilt to ensure sand contact, appreciating that the bounce is going to carry you through, as long as you're making a good rotation, we're going to see some spin on the golf ball as well.
Well, you can learn from doing it over and over.
No, for sure. And that's what makes a player is being able to accommodate different techniques for different shots and different lies. That being said, right here I'm off of more of a footprint, so more of a hard pan kind of lie. So if we get washed out conditions, concrete, some different stuff like that, if I were to tilt back, for sure, different conditions. So if I were to get here and tilt back, so let's say we're playing off of more of a, a footprint. From here, I might not want to tilt in the same fashion because I'm going to go ahead and hit behind the sand and the club might skip. I might catch the ball thin. And so from here, what I would want to say is, even if I did the same thing with a 56 versus a 46, again, I have more loft here, but if I were to tilt back, I'm going to go ahead and catch sand behind it, cause me to hit the ball thin. The same way, if I were to incorporate positive tilt in the full swing, I'm going to hit it more crisp. Might be great for a 40 to 60 yard bunker shot, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but from this lie, not appropriate. What we want to do instead is the same way we talk in chipping regarding when we have a tight lie condition, we want to have a little bit more negative tilt. So instead of going ahead and tilting the upper body back in the bunker, what we're going to do is we're going to tilt the lower body back. This is going to create the same descending blow on the way down, but instead of having the face to be square, from here we do need to open the face up a little bit. The reason why is this is still what's going to engage a little bit of bounce. Because if I create that steep angle of attack, if the club just digs in, it's going to get stuck. At least if I have the face even a little bit open, if I have negative tilt, it's going to hit down and from there skip. So if I'm here off of a tighter lie, I'm at a negative tilt, and still be able to hit, a higher shot from a very tight lie condition. So from this vantage point right here, we're playing off of firmer stuff. So it's not to say that I don't break my wrists. Like in chipping and pitching, the wrists are passive. I'm not getting here trying to create an active set.
That's what I was taught.
No question. And you would have to do this to create more speed if the body's not rotating well. So somebody would say to you, yes, if you're playing off of firm sand or if you don't have a good rotation, add more speed with the hands.
Yeah.
The issue is where that club bottoms out is going to change from swing to swing, which is where everyone has this phobia of bunkers just because they are always changing the firing pattern of the hand. So on a more of a down the line view, if I were to get here off of, again, more of a footprint, really firm sand, I'm going to do the same thing. We're open up the face a little bit to have some bounce engagement, some more trajectory, create some negative tilt by tilting the hip back, and everything I'm doing in my swing is 100% the same. Where I'm going ahead, I'm able to hit shots that have a lot more spin because it's negative tilt, but at no point is there any fixation for me to say, hey, I have to hit this spot in the sand. It's accomplished via the tilt. So to give you another instance of another shot that we oftentimes see, which I feel like is my favorite shot to hit, and it's the buried lie shot. So this is the one that gives a lot of people trepidation, and for the guys that teach on tour, this is the one shot that blows their mind the most. For as much as they love the putting stuff because it makes them the most money, this right here is called Gary Player's $1 Million Secret. So the story associated with this is kind of cute in that Gary and Jack Nicklaus were playing at Augusta together, and Augusta, of course, has a different kind of sand called silica. It's not exactly sand. The purpose is to give you perfect lies every time, in an attempt to try to prevent buried lies and things like that. But in fact, Gary did find himself with a buried lie at Augusta and walked into the bunker with like a gap wedge or so. And so he walks in the bunker with a buried lie kind of like that. It's probably more so in the lip than this. And, Jack says to him, listen, you don't have enough loft on that wedge to get the ball out of that hole. To which Gary responded, I don't need loft. Walked into the shot, proceeded to shut the club down like this. Okay? He dropped the handle, set up with the ball right off the hosel, and made what was a full swing. And so the neat thing about this is there's nothing about that face angle that should dictate the ball going as high and as straight as it did.
Right.
So what happened? So this took us about a year on high-speed cameras to realize. But what ends up happening is, as you'll see, if I drop the hands, first of all, there's a V that's formed in the sand right there. Okay? From this vantage point, if I drop the hands, there's a V between the bottom of the club as well as the hosel. The ball gets shot out at a bisecting angle to that. Why? So if you imagine a backhoe, okay, going through the sand gets shoveled in towards the hosel. The ball literally rides that crest of sand and goes straight up. And so the neat thing about this is it's really talking about the friction of the sand coming into the face, getting stuck here for a moment, and then going straight up. If you're sitting up with the ball off the hosel, it's riding that crest and going up. Pops right up. And that's where one of the worst things you can do from a lie like this, even if you have more of a, let's say you have more of a fried egg style shot, kind of like that, one of the worst things you could do from there, make this even a little bit worse, is open up the face. Because again, to try to get this club to work through that sand, is very, very difficult. Because the full blunt edge of the sole is coming right into contact with the sand. Whereby, if you were to get closed face, drop that handle down, the ball is literally riding that crest of sand up. And so this is one of those shots yet again that I was in the Champions Lounge 2 or 3 years back sitting with Jack and Gary, and I brought this shot up. And of course everyone thought what Gary was doing was having his club enter the sand and then all of a sudden he would open it up magically. It has nothing to do with how he hit the shot. And of course Gary Player, being this whole bunker savant, knew a lot of stuff regarding how to work his hands and through the bunker. He was very, very gifted and also spent a lot of time practicing. So I sat down and I talked about the shot, and apparently what had happened was when, Jack of course said, Gary, what are you doing? How is it, you're walking the bunker without, not even a lofted wedge, but also shutting the face down? What are you doing? And Gary's like, I'm going to hole it. Jack's like, $1 million. So the story goes is that he did. So while sitting with him that day, I said to Gary, did Jack ever pay up? He's like, freak no. And so either way, it kind of illustrates the fact that all these players of yesteryear were very creative, very talented, and they had to figure out ways, not necessarily knowing what they were doing and why, but rather appreciating that they had to experiment a lot. And that's where being able to have an analysis in terms of why this works says we can make bets with our buddies all day long and win as many beers as we can, saying, hey, come over here, find the biggest guy in your group, say, hey, I want you to step on the ball as hard as you can. And what you say is, the worse the lie, the more I close the face, the more I drop the hands, the harder I want to swing. And from here, it's always going to get the ball out. And so it's one of those things to say, hey, it's a good extra shot to have in my arsenal. And so just to kind of recap a little bit before we, of course, have you in hit a couple of shots with some drills, is to say that there are different ways to engage bounce and also different things we want to accomplish from the sand. In that for as long as I'm playing off of soft sand conditions, I want to engage more bounce and I want to hit more of the sand first. So from there, it would certainly warrant more of that tilt back action, which will expose more bounce, as well as ensure me hitting the sand behind. Playing off of firm sand, concrete, footprints, that's when I would say incorporate negative tilt by tilt in the lower body back. And again, in the bunker, starts with a B, something always tilts back. Whether my upper body tilts back or my lower body tilts back. And so firm sand, lower body tilts back. We talked about plug lies, Gary Player's $1 million secret, where the worse the lie, the more we close the club, the more we drop the hands. That way the ball gets shot on top of a crest of sand that rides up at a bisecting angle to the hosel versus the leading edge. When it comes to, controlling the longer bunker shots, those sticky 40 to 60 yard shots, there's really two techniques there as well. One of which, do we hit the ball clean? Second of which is, do we play an explosion style shot? The answer in terms of strategy has to do with what's the situation. Because I can certainly grab a 9-iron and play that same tilt back explosion shot from soft sand conditions and hit a shot more in that 40 to 60 yard range. So this would be super advantageous if the trouble is on the short side of things. So if I have to carry over water, I would probably take a pitching wedge, make a full swing, hitting more of an explosion style shot. Because the miss is to catch a little bit of the golf ball, if I do happen to do so, which will cause the ball to go a little bit further. But I'm playing for an explosion shot, therefore the ball should not go shorter than that. Let's say I had trouble long. From there, I would try to go ahead, like I illustrated earlier. If I tilt the lower body forward, the bottom of the arc stays the same. That's what's going to produce that 40 to 60 yard shot. And of course, the miss would be if I catch a little bit of sand first, which causes the ball to go shorter, which is a perfect strategy when the trouble is long. So not to say that, hey, there's a one shot to hit from those 40, 60 yard sticky bunker shots that the PGA pros, really try to avoid, but to say there are two techniques based upon different conditions. And so based upon this understanding, we walk into the bunker instead of having trepidation saying, hey, how is it we're going to hit this shot? But rather say there's different techniques that are warranted for different conditions.